I stumbled upon a haunted security guard post. Now the whispers won't let me leave. I never should have opened that door. The air felt heavy, as if it knew secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. Just an hour ago, I was browsing through old, forgotten paths in the city, searching for some forgotten adventure. The night was chilly, shadows creeping in corners, the kind of cold that made bones ache. I was drawn to that post, a crumbling structure abandoned for years, its windows like hollow eyes watching me. The moment I stepped inside, the darkness swallowed me whole. My heart raced as I glanced around. Old monitors flickered, casting eerie, greenish hues. Dust particles danced in the faint light, like trapped souls. A metallic scent hung in the air, mixed with something earthy, almost like damp earth, an unsettling hint of decay. And then I heard them, whispers, soft, barely their murmurs that bounced off the walls. I strained to listen, but the words were just out of reach. My skin prickled, a chill running up my spine. I moved deeper, where objects lay discarded. A cracked coffee mug, reports yellowed with age, a flashlight that flickered like a dying star. I felt like an intruder in a shrine of darkness. The whispers grew louder. They seemed to beckon me, urging me to stay. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I found myself peering into the shadows, searching for the source of the sounds. My breath quickened. Each footstep echoed like a drumbeat in a silent room. Suddenly, loud footsteps broke the tension, heavy and deliberate. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. The walls felt like they were closing in. I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was just the wind or my imagination playing tricks. But then, silence fell. An unsettling, lingering quiet that sent shivers through my soul. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. Panic surged. I was trapped. The whispers swirled around me, a chilling symphony coaxing me deeper into madness. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. The temperature dropped, frost creeping along the walls. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. The shadows danced, and then I felt Ida's presence, looming just behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. But before I could scream, everything went dark. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. A cold breeze enveloped me, sharp as a knife, seeping into my very bones. Blink, and I was still standing in that cramped guard post. But everything was darker now, the oppressive shadows stretching like twisted fingers, clawing at my resolve. I raised a hand to my face, but I could barely see it. The darkness clung to my skin, thick and suffocating. I felt paralyzed, the whispers intensifying into a cacophony, a discordant chant reverberating in my skull. They were speaking now, phrases twisting and intertwining like a sinister web. Stay. Reveal. Release. Forgotten. The words slithered through the air, chilling me deeper than the cold that I in a moment of clarity. I remembered the flashlight from earlier. I fumbled through the dark, fingers trembling, until I found the cold metal of the flashlight. It clicked, and a beam of yellow light cut through the blackness, illuminating a patch of the room. Shadows recoiled momentarily, revealing piles of debris and old furniture draped in dust like worn shrouds. I steadied my breath, glancing around. The monitors seemed to glare back at me, their flickering screens still alive. One showed a grainy image, static at first, then jolting into something coherent. A close-up of what looked like an empty room down a narrow hallway, lit only by a pale security light. I squinted, the eerie silence punctuated by the disturbance of static. But then, movement, a blur darted across the frame. My heart sank. What did it capture? I felt another chill crawl down my spine. The whispers now formed a chorus, frantic and relentless. Look. Look closer, they urged. Against my better judgment, I leaned in toward the monitor, trying to catch the fleeting image again. And that's when the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into an even deeper darkness. And then, I heard it. Footsteps. Not the echoing thumps that had so spurned my breath earlier, but something softer. Methodical. There were at least 2, maybe 3 pairs, approaching with a wicked rhythm. I jerked around, the beam of my flashlight jittering as I scanned the room, a desperate attempt to stave off the encroaching panic. Who's there? My voice cracked, swallowed by the shadows. Show yourself. Silence was my only reply. It hung heavily in the air, a thick blanket that smothered any shred of bravery I had clung to. I turned back to the monitors, desperate for the safety of the light. But now the screen displayed an unsettling stillness, mirroring the silence that draped around me. And there, in the frame of that dimly lit hallway, something new emerged. A figure materialized, pale and gaunt, a statue draped in the shadow of despair. I could almost make out its features. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a mouth twisted in an expression that seemed to scream silently. My breath caught, a visceral reaction sparking panic within me. But then, the figure raised a hand, pointing right at me as if it could see me through the veil of the monitor. Suddenly, the whispers erupted into a frenetic crescendo, words garbled and frenzied, surrounding me, crashing over me in waves. Join us. Join us. Join us. They tugged at my sanity, unraveling me thread by thread. My heart raced, ripe with terror. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. I spun around, flashlight trembling as it swept over the darkened corners of the room. And there, in a patch of flickering light, emerged something grotesque, a twisted shape, eyes like burning coals, a rotting grin that split across its face. Release, it rasped, each word drenched in malice. I stumbled back, the beam of my flashlight flickering out for a heartbeat. For one agonizing instant, there was only darkness and despair. Did I end that claustrophobic moment? The door behind me suddenly lurched open, creaking on its rusty hinges. The split of brightness flooded the air, revealing the grotesque figure lunging toward me. The whispers spiked into a piercing wail, and I didn't think I ran. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, shadows curling around my legs, tightening their grip as I sprinted for my life. But the flickering lights taunted me, guiding me further into the abyss. And as I dashed through the doorway into the unknown, the whisper transformed into an anguished scream. You cannot leave with that. I fell through the opening, the world turning upside down as I plunged into the darkness, enveloped by the cacophony of tormented souls begging me to stay. I landed hard on a cold concrete floor, the breath knocked out of me. Fumbling in panic, I scrambled to my feet, the flashlight miraculously flickering back to life. As I steadied myself, the beam sliced through the oppressive dark, revealing a long, stony corridor lined with heavy doors, each one marked with peeling paint and cryptic symbols that twisted my stomach and my heart hammered like a frantic drumbeat, each pulse echoing through the damp silence. I turned back, half expecting to see the grotesque figure emerging from the door I had just fled. But it remained shut, the threatening whispers muffled beyond its threshold. I had escaped one nightmare, only to trap myself in another. The air was thick with a fetid odor, a mixture of decay and despair, causing bile to rise in my throat. I aimed the light down the corridor. Each door loomed like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. As I stepped forward, the whispers returned, softer now, almost mocking. You're still here, still one of us. I twitched at their insidious tones, memories of the figure's rotting grin flashing in my mind. I was losing my grip on reality, and the shadows felt alive around me, slithering and shifting as if they had a will of their own. Find the truth, a voice hissed, breaking into my thoughts. I shivered, unsure if it came from my own mind or a source deeper within the walls. Something was drawing me further down the hallway as if the very building was alive, pulsating with a dread-filled hunger. That I hesitated, pulse racing, before scanning the doors. One stood slightly ajar, the handle twisted to an impossible angle. A faint glow seeped from the crack, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the stagnant air. Find the truth? I echoed softly to myself, feeling irresistibly compelled to explore, despite every fiber of my being screaming to turn back. The whispers roared in agreement, urging me onward. As I gripped the cold metal of the door handle and pushed it open, the hinges moaned gently, almost pleading. Inside, a dimly lit room stretched before me, the glow originating from a flickering light bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. The walls were lined with old photographs, their frames crooked and warped, faces frozen in time-distorted smiles and vacant stares that seemed to follow me. My breath quickened as I stepped inside, the door falling shut behind me. The sudden absence of sound was deafening. The whispers had gone silent, replaced by the unsettling sound of my own panting that I caught sight of a large table in the center of the room, strewn with unsorted files and papers. I approached it slowly, compelled by an unseen force, the unsettling atmosphere suffocating. I plucked a file from the top, the paper crumbling under my touch. The words "Missing Persons Report" loomed large across the first page, adorned with handwritten notes that became increasingly erratic with each passing line, and my hands trembled as I rifled through the contents. Names, dates, faces of people who had disappeared without a trace. My heart twisted with recognition. One face seemed too familiar. I couldn't breathe. My name was scrawled hastily at the bottom of one page, alongside frantic scribbles about the one who will reveal all. That a deafening roar exploded in my mind, echoing the frenzied whispers from before, crashing together in a violent tempest. You will never escape. Reveal the secrets. Join us. The weight of their insistence pressed against my chest. As I gasped for air, the flickering light above dimmed and then extinguished, plunging me into a claustrophobic darkness thick enough to choke. In the oppressive blackness, I could hear the soft padding of footsteps echoing from behind me, slow and deliberate. The door had somehow opened. Panic flared in my chest as I whirled around. My flashlight blinked, sputtering like a dying heartbeat, revealing the outlines of shadowy forms emerging from the depths of the hallway. They advanced, their grotesque figures slipping in and out of the flickering light like phantoms, silent, strong, and drawn to me like moths to flame. That I stumbled back, the file slipping from my grip and fluttering to the ground like a fallen leaf, scattering further into the darkness. My panic turned to dread as the whispers crescendoed into a thrumming pulse that wrapped around my mind, a prelude to the horror I was about to face. Stay, they commanded, a cacophony that thundered through my soul. You cannot leave. You must reveal the truth. And just as the first vile figure lunged at me, the very walls began to close in, the air turning heavy with an unseen force, wrapping around me like a tightening noose. In a last desperate act, I turned towards the door, feeling the cold grip of hands pushing against me from behind, the spectral whispers shrieking louder than ever. Join us! I leaped forward, the world closing in, and as I dove toward the opening, I felt a jagged hand brush across my arm, pulling me back into the suffocating darkness. The chilling chaos consumed me, and in those horrified moments, I wondered if I would ever see the outside world again. Then, with a bone-chilling wail, the light above burst into flames, illuminating everything in a blaze of horrific clarity. I was staring into a mirror, and behind me, smirking with a dark satisfaction, was myself, usurped by the darkness. The flames flickered wildly, casting long, twisted shadows that danced menacingly against the walls of the room. For a split second, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a harsh, hellish reflection. But the thing that looked back at me was wrong, grotesque even, with my features twisted into a nightmarish grin that stirred something primal within my gut. Join us, it echoed, the voice a sickening mockery of my own. Panic seized me as the realization slithered into my mind. I was not alone in this hell. There were more shadows in the mirror, emerging from within its surface like venomous wraiths. They reached out with grotesque hands, clawing at the barrier, begging for release. The echo of my own voice faded into the screams of the lost, a symphony of despair that reverberated around the room. I stumbled back, instinct urging me to retreat from the encroaching figures, but my legs felt chained to the ground. My flashlight fell to the floor with a dull thud, crackling against the concrete as it rolled away, its light extinguishing just as I caught a glimpse of a figure in the darkness. That I spun to reorient myself, heart pounding, and felt it. Another presence. It brushed past me, cold and serpentine, wrapping around my legs. A low growl reverberated in the air, deep and primal. The whispers intensified, swirling in a maddening crescendo that clawed at the edges of my sanity. You must stay, you must see. With a surge of adrenaline, I heaved forward, fighting against the invisible hands that clawed at me from all sides. The door to the hallway loomed closer, but the grotesque silhouettes in the mirror twisted in desperation. Their eerie eyes pleading no longer human, but marred by a darkness that wanted to seep into me, witness the truth. They screeched, and I felt flashes of memory-stolen moments of laughter, chilling cries, and the realization that they were once living beings, now trapped in this purgatory. Each face twisted with pain, every soul latching onto me, attempting to pull me into their purgatory of despair. I slammed against the door, the rusty handle screeching as it twisted under my grasp. I could hear the sounds of their suffering, a droning chorus of unheard words echoing through the depths of my mind, promising I too would become one of them. The barricade creaked ominously, threatening to yield to the weight of horror behind me. With a desperate cry, fueled by both fear and fervent resolve, I shoved the door open. It swung with merciless ferocity into the corridor beyond, but the instant I crossed its threshold, I was met with a menacing new reality. The walls pulsated grotesquely, as if alive, breathing in rhythm with my frantic heart. The corridor stretched endlessly, illuminated by flickering bulbs that cast blinking stabs of light. And there, at the far end, stood the grotesque figure, the one that had haunted my dreamsome mirage of flesh and shadow, eyes burning with the promise of horrors waiting to be revealed. It beckoned with a crooked finger, whispering in tones that sent chills down my spine. Come, join them. As I stood rooted in place, paralyzed by dread, a horde of pale, spectral forms began to emerge from the shadows lining the corridor. They stumbled toward me, their eyes hollow, mouths twisted into silent screams. The wailing crescendo building around me until it transformed into a physical force, compressing my chest, urging me to hinder. Suddenly, the floor beneath me heaved violently, sending me crashing to my knees. From the cracked seams in the ground, hands erupted slender, bony fingers clawing and grasping, dragging me toward a dark abyss that yawned hungrily just below the surface. The darkness loomed, and the corridor twisted and shifted, closing in all around me. My last shred of sanity clung to the thought of escape as I shrieked, "No!" The tolling silence seemed to mock me, resonating with the chilling laughter of the shadowy forms encroaching upon my sanity. And then, everything collapsed into that singular moment of despair as the figures descended upon me. I felt their coldness, their decaying breath against my skin, and heard my name resonating, intertwined with their haunting laughter. All that I had been torn asunder, merging with the cries of the lost and that echoes, in that chilling symphony of souls, a voice not my own, but familiar nonetheless whispered through the cacophony, "You will become one with us, whether you wish it or not." The ground heaved again, and suddenly I was falling not into darkness, but into an endless sea of faces and despair, faces that seemed to recognize me, faces that whispered secrets I longed to forget. And just before I succumbed to the pull of oblivion, a searing light exploded around me, illuminating a word scrawled in the air, a promise, a curse, truth. Then, darkness. I awoke, gasping, amid an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow me whole. The darkness had shifted, settling like a thick fog, blanketing the remnants of the infernal chaos I had experienced just moments before. Was it days? Time had become an endless spiral in this hellscape that I found myself lying on a cold, concrete floor, the corrosive scent of mildew assaulting my nostrils, mingling with an undertone of burnt rubber. My heart thundered in my chest as I struggled to rise, the weight of anguish rattling my bones. It took a moment for my surroundings to materialize through the haze of terror that loomed just beyond the reach of my consciousness. I was in a small security guard post, the walls adorned with flickering monitors that displayed static images of the corridors I had fled. Now resembling a macabre gallery of doomed souls, I staggered to my feet, grasping at the edge of the desk to steady myself, the cold metal pressing into my palms as if whispering promises of Safitya lie wrapped in steel. The monitors flickered, their screens bursting to life, revealing distorted faces with contorted expressions of agony, trapped in a world unseen. Their mouths moved in a silent scream, communicating unholy secrets that made my skin crawl. "Leave us," they seemed to plead, eyes flickering with a spark of recognition that sent chills cascading down my spine. I stumbled backward, but the door behind me swung shut with a resounding crash, trapping me in the suffocating gloom. "Join us." The ghostly voices harmonized from the screens, a haunting echo of the things I had witnessed before. I felt an ache in my chest, a morbid curiosity pulling me closer to the monitors as their touch grew more intimate, as if reaching out to ensnare my very soul. My reflection returned on the glass, but I barely recognized the person staring back at me, as wide and frantic, lips trembling. I was becoming the vessel for their despair. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crack broke through the tormented silence, causing my heart to spike like a jack-in-the-box. The walls themselves seemed to pulsate, throbbing with the anguish of the souls trapped within the building, a pulsating heartbeat that synced with the erratic rhythm of my own. I hesitated, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach as the air crackled with a static energy, every hair on my body standing on end from the corner of my eye. The flickering lights revealed a cloaked figure standing just beyond the periphery of the shadows, a shrouded sentinel who watched with piercing yellow eyes. I felt the blood drain from my face as it stepped forward, revealing a skeletal hand extending toward the monitors. "Witness the convergence," it whispered, the voice riddled with 1,000 shades of despair and malice. "They will find you if you do not heed their calls." The specters on the screens twisted, morphing into 1,000 distorted versions of myself, decayed and lifeless, each iteration reaching out toward my reality, fingers stretching across the glass as if they sought to pull me in. I turned, panic festering within me, but the door was gone, leaving me ensnared in this accursed prison of grief and despair. "I have to escape," I muttered to myself, moving toward a side window. The jagged glass offered an escape, but it was enveloped in a darkness that felt alive, charged with malevolence. It was here that the whispers became a torrent, reminding me of the promise I had felt. Or was it a curse? To witness the truth. Before I could make a decision, a cacophony of sounds erupted, the monitors now exuding a blaring alarm alongside the tortured cries of innumerable voices. The descent into madness accelerated as the temperature plummeted, each breath visible, each moment a heartbeat closer to despair. Then, abruptly, the lights flickered back on and I nearly screamed. The room transformed before my eyes into a nightmarish stage, where the boundaries of reality blurred. The spectral shapes from the monitors were now in the room with me, their ghastly bodies emerging from the shadows, trailing behind them the whispers of all the lives they had claimed, a relentless tide of grieving souls lost in their desperation. Feeding off my fear, "Help us remember," they chanted with each step, their elongated fingers stretching toward me, brushing against my skin with chilling coldness. The sensation felt like icy fingers pressing at the edges of my sanity. That I, in a last-ditch effort, as I stumbled backward, I reached for the only defense I had left, the security panel. My fingers slammed against the buttons, desperately throwing alarms and lights into chaotic disarray. I needed to break free, to shatter this illusion. But the moment I hit the final switch, the grim figure in the shadows let out a piercing wail as the lights dimmed once more, plunging me into darkness. Then the soft, inviting pull of the darkness enveloped me again, an insistent whisper that spoke of the truth. Suddenly, I felt an iron grip seizing my arm, cold and unyielding, and the chilling laughter filled the air, anew, a promise and a demand. "Stay with us." The pressure mounted with blinding intensity as I felt myself being dragged backwards, into the very shadows themselves, the last remnants of my sanity eroding as their anguished cries melded with my own. Just as I was about to disappear entirely into their depths, a voice broke through the chaos, the same familiar whisper I had heard earlier, echoing yet again. "Remember." Before I could comprehend it, the world blinked out of existence, drowning me in darkness with a single profound truth thundering in my mind, leaving only a question lingering in the horror of that moment. What did I need to remember? As the darkness swallowed me, a suffocating weight pressed against my chest, and the whispers faded into an all-consuming silence. I drifted through an inky void, my senses dulled, awareness slipping through my fingers like sand. But then, like a distant echo, a pulsing light clung to the edges of my consciousness. It flickered, revealing a twisted silhouette amidst the nothingness. I felt it tugging at me, dragging me back towards reality, the lustrous glow of dim monitors beckoning me home. With a jolt, I found myself sprawled on the concrete floor of the security guard post once more. The room seemed altered. The flickering screens displayed kaleidoscopic horrors now. No longer merely shadows, but a world grotesquely alive, each frame showcasing scenarios of tragic deaths. Faceless patrons devoured by unseen monsters, bodies folding into oneself, blood pooling in otherworldly patterns. My heart raced again, the familiar ache of dread filling my throat, choking me. I could still hear the distant echo of their manic laughter, the cold fingers of despair running down my spine. I shook my head vigorously, my breath shallow. "I'm not staying," I gasped, forcing my legs beneath me, fully aware that a true escape was elusive. Like air slipping through a cracked window, a flurry of screams erupted from the monitors, distorting into a chorus of my own namey heartbeats synchronized with their cries. "Remember, remember," they shrieked, and I swayed on my feet, caught between fury and fear. I needed to leave. I needed to disconnect from their madness that clawed at my mind. Yet I was an unwilling pawn on this horror-stricken stage that I turned from the screens, wishing to shatter the treachery of my own reflection, intertwining with those lost souls. The urge to join them was an insidious poison curling in my veins, igniting a longing I couldn't understand. Recollection struck like a lightning bolt through the haze. Fragments of a photograph, bright smiles, the face of someone I yearned for. I had lost them. It was a tragedy so profound. I could not afford to linger in this realm of sorrow. I would not join them. I fought against the tide of despair that drew me toward the monitors, pulling away from their promises. Just then, the door slammed open, a loud, thunderous crash that left me disoriented. The figure standing in the doorway was a grotesque parody of life. Cloaked in a fabric that seemed to ripple and twist, it seemed neither human nor beast, yet it radiated an essence of both. With absent eyes glowing like embers, it regarded me, an ancient hunger reflected in its gaze. "They have not forgotten you," it hissed, an icy whisper curling around the edges of my mind, as if my thoughts were not my own. "You are part of this dance, whether you will it or not." Instinctively, I backed away, attempting to retreat into the dark recesses of the room. Desperation clawed at my throat, and I stumbled once more toward the monitors. "Help me!" I cried out, but my voice barely emerged from the chaos, drowned by the cacophony of tragic symphonies around me. The creature slowly advanced, its skeletal hand outstretched, fragile fingers stretching like vines through the shadows as I caught a glimpse of shadows flickering behind it, grotesque figures shifting violently in the darkness, gnashing their teeth. "Join the remembrance," it urged, each word like acid on my ears. "You must pay the toll to know the truth." I couldn't breathe. Paralyzed by dread, I lost my grip on reason, the weight of the cursed memories clawing at my mind like a wave of agonizing loss. The figures in the monitors, the tortured souls, climbed from the screens, pouring into the room. One by one, they merged with the air, forming grotesque shapes that twirled around me, whispering secrets of unbearable pain. Cries of anguish erupted around me, mixing with tantalizing promises of revelations. What could they possibly offer me? I sensed myself teetering between understanding and oblivion, gravitating toward the clutches of the shadows. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, drowning out the voice of reason. "Remember who you are," the cloaked figure urged, its grasp now tight around my wrist, pulling me toward it. A smile revealing rows of jagged teeth that dripped with the substance of long-forgotten nightmares as I felt the boundary between reality and madness begin to shatter. The figures from the monitors spun in a fast-motion dance, their eyes locking onto me, each a mosaic of anguish, a reflection of my own fear. A final scream tore at my throat, breaking free of my will. Then, just as the world began to tilt and dissolve, I caught a glimpse of blackness, and through it, a fleeting vision of a child's laughter, the future I had lost, the memories I must reclaim. But did it even exist anymore? Before I had any chance to understand, the darkness consumed me again, a maw opening to swallow my resolve whole. Witness the truth. The voice echoed, now sharper, more insistent. Just then, I felt the phantom fingers of my memories slip once again into the abyss as I heard a final, chilling promise drift through the air. The key to your escape is within the walls, with that perilous hint lingering in my head. The world around me faded to black once more, leaving me paralyzed at the edge of a chilling precipice, grasping for any shred of hope as I spiraled deeper into horrors yet unseen. The abyss released me back into the guard post, but the air felt thicker, as though each breath was a blade lodged in my throat. I blinked against the suffocating darkness. Even the dim glow of the monitors now felt like a backdrop of horrors waiting to unfold. The whir of machinery warped into a sinister lullaby, echoing faint memories of laughter intertwined with cries of pure terror that I was alone. Or so I thought. In the corner of the room, a shadow flitted near the coat rack, a movement too quick to catch, yet I saw the glimmer of pale fingers hook around a frayed brim of a forgotten hat. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribs, each beat threatening to break free. I turned slowly, dread curling in my stomach, and faced the empty space with rising terror. Was someone else trapped here with me? Or simply another trick of the darkness? But then I noticed the glint. It caught the light off a small object resting by the monitors. I moved cautiously, drawn by a mixture of fear and irresistible curiosity. It was the photograph. The one I had lost. The faces of cherished moments turned to unbearable reminders. A child, vibrant and smiling, their laughter almost tangible in the air. The sight slammed against my consciousness like a freight train, drenching me in a bittersweet grief I thought I had buried. Fingers trembling, I reached to claim the image, but the instant I grasped it, the temperature of the room plummeted. Shadows expanded and warped, feeding hungrily on my despair. A low humming began to reverberate through the walls, vibrating the very foundation of the guard post. The whispering intensified, morphing into a language I couldn't comprehend, a whispering chorus that clawed at my sanity. Find us, remember, you must remember. And then there was silence, the predatory pause before a storm. I stood frozen, the photograph burning like a live ember in my hand, my heart racing as the temperature continued to drop, a breathless chill smothering the warmth of my skin. I was acutely aware of the eyes, those unseen eyes watching me, waiting for the moment I would succumb to the shadows. Suddenly, the monitors flickered, and a new scene illuminated the darkness. A horrific tableau unfolded on the screens, each horrific moment processed like a grainy film. A child, much like the one smiling in the photograph, was running through the halls of this very building. Her laughter echoed hauntingly, but soon it turned to terrified cries as dark figures swirled around her. They had her. They were closing in, devouring the joy that once filled these empty spaces. Stop! I cried out, despite knowing the futility. I launched the photograph across the room as if it would shatter the spell binding me, but the impact only amplified the cries vibrating off the walls. Ghostly figures began to materialize from the dark corners, each one a fragmented shadow of sorrow. Release her, I yelled, wanting to tear the very fabric of reality apart to save that little girl, the essence of hope intertwined with my own tortured memories. But the shadows only laughed, a sound as dreadful as the grave, curling around me like cold tendrils. Above their mockery, something shifted, and I could have sworn the grotesque visage of the cloaked figure I had encountered earlier grinned from the depths of the darkness. Then, a dull thud echoed from the far corner, a sound all too familiar, yet twisted. The basement, the depths of this place. I recalled the whispers urging me to remember, and a revelation struck me with the force of a hammer. The key was not only in the walls, but in the depths of my own memories, submerged in an ocean of grief. Panic surged through me as I turned toward the door that led down into the basement. Every instinct screamed for me to flee, but somehow I knew I had to venture into that labyrinth of shadows. The walls themselves held the secrets of those who vanished before Meth toll of every tortured soul lingered just beyond the threshold. And if I hoped to find my lost joy, I had no choice. Point one step forward, then another, daring myself to walk through the veil of darkness. A grotesque laugh curled in the air behind me, but I chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the soft echoes of the child's laughter, guiding me deeper into the unknown. I descended the stairs into an abyss cloaked in shadows, the dim light flickering erratically like the last breaths of hope. And as I stepped off the final stair onto the cold concrete, the air thickened with raw, palpable dread. Then, the door slammed shut behind me, a resounding finality that echoed through the stillness, and with it, the whispers grew louder, screaming my name in a frenzy that clawed at my sanity. In that moment of dread, unprepared for what awaited, it hit me like a punch to the gut. The laughter had stopped. Instead, the faintest of sobs echoed through the chill, followed by an almost childlike, echoing voice that sent shivers racing down my spine. Helpmate turned, and there, in the corner of the basement, a small figure stood backlit by an unnatural glow, just out of reach of the light. It looked so familiar, my heart pounding as I realized a horrifying truth. The child in the photograph. She was here, leaning closer, my breath caught in my throat as I recalled her name, staggering back as the tiny silhouette whispered urgently, her eyes wide and terrified, "They're coming for you. You have to run." And before I could react, the walls around me began to pulse, vibrating as if alive, shadows spilling forth from every crevice to drown us both. The whispers surged, and just as I turned to flee, I felt tiny hands clutch at my arm, yanking me back into the clutches of darkness. "Help me!" she screamed again, her voice echoing within the frantic rhythm of my heart. The realization struck me like a knife. I couldn't save her without confronting the truth hidden in this cursed place. But my path was obscured, deepening into an unfathomable terror, and as the darkness enveloped us, a chilling chorus began to chant through the void. "They are ours, you are mine." That horrifying promise hung in the air, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, the escape I sought was buried far deeper than I had ever imagined. The darkness pulsed around me, a living entity yearning to consume every shred of light and hope. The child's grip was frail yet insistent, anchoring me in a reality that felt as slippery as an oil-slicked floor. I could barely register the icy tremor in her hands, her wide eyes alight with terror as she pleaded, "They won't stop, you have to help me." Fighting my rising panic, I scanned the basement, its edges blurred into an abyss, a foul stench of mildew and decay wafting from unseen corners. Forgotten relics of a time long past lay strewn about. Broken toys, remnants of laughter now replaced by an oppressive sorrow. Each fragment felt like a ghost, suspended in the air, watching our desperate interplay. Who are they?" I croaked, my voice barely rising above the cacophony of whispers that gripped the very marrow of my bones. The child shrank back, her silhouette flickering like the dying flame of a candle. In that moment, I thought I saw the faint outline of a bigger shadow creeping behind her, dark hair flowing like smoke in the dim light. I could feel its gaze piercing through mean, unsettling familiarity that made my skin crawl. "They're the ones who took me," she sobbed, voice trembling. "And now they want you too. The walls know your name and they're hungry." Just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, a raucous bang exploded from the door behind me, sending vibrations rattling through the concrete floor. It rattled on its hinges, a desperate plea of escape, but all I could see was the child's terrified face reflecting my own dread back at me. "Help me," she cried, her little hands reaching out, fingers trembling as they clawed through the shadows. "Please, I can't be here alone. You can't leave me." A serrated howl reverberated through the space, echoing the child's plight, a guttural reminder of the entities that coiled around this basement like snakes in tall grass. With adrenaline surging, I lunged toward her, the weight of dread curling in my stomach as shadows undulated, an orchestra of despair conducting a sinister symphony. But before I could reach her, the air shifted violently, temperature plummeting as the shadows morphed and coalesced into monstrous figures. They loomed large, their forms flickering like static on an old television screen, as if forming and unforming simultaneously, feeding on my fear. They wore the faces of lost children, twisted smiles that once signified innocent laughter now warped into expressions of torment. "Join us, join them," they murmured in a chorus that twisted my insides. I staggered, grappling with an urge to flee and a desperate need to save this child who was now tethered to me through an invisible bond of terror. I stood between the encroaching darkness and the shimmering light of her fearful presence. The choice lay heavy on my chest, like a stone pressed against my heart. The figures advanced, stretching out elongated arms, their sinister smiles promising both suffering and solace in the same breath. "Come play with us," they taunted, weaving words laced with malice, urging me to succumb to the shadows that beckoned. "Leave her alone," I yelled, summoning a strength I didn't know I possessed. I rushed to shield the child, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited us. Yet, the moment I stepped forward, the world spun violently, warping and distorting as if reality itself quaked with a malevolent force. The child's screams melded with the shadow's taunts until I could no longer discern one from the other. Just then, the ground beneath us shuddered, pulling apart like rifts in a crumbling earth. "Help me," she cried again, her tiny voice echoing in agony. "They're pulling me away." As I reached out, my fingers grazing the cool sanity of her wrist, the darkness surged, a tidal wave of despair crashing against my resolve. The shadows howled in indignation, swirling around us like a cyclone of anguish. My feet slipped on the uneven ground, awareness blurring as the figures encircled us in one horrifying instant. The barrier between light and darkness thinned. I felt her grip falter, uncertainty creeping into her fervent hold on me, and with a jolt, the shadows surged forward, dragging her into their undulating mass. She screamed, a sound that shattered the air with pure terror, echoed by the bitterness of her impending fate. "Help me!" The child's plea morphed into silence, her form swallowed by the encroaching darkness as the walls themselves seemed to screech with rage. That I flung myself forward, yearning to grasp a last fraying thread of hope, but it was too late. The shadows closed in, wrapping around me, coiling tight like an embrace before my vision went dark. And just as I succumbed to the void, a voice pierced through the suffocating despair, crooning a familiar melodious song from the days of innocence long gone. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed the echo of her figure shimmering within the darkness, still calling out to me. But then it faded like drifting smoke. Then, a startling realization shattered the silence. I wasn't alone. The door to the basement opened with a dreadful creak as silhouettes stepped into view against a backdrop of decaying light. Their eyes were hollow, reflecting shadows illuminated by the penetrating glow of an unseen light, and as they took their first step forward, I knew that the real nightmare was just beginning. At first, it felt like a terrible, twisted dream that clawed at my consciousness, distorting reality with each labored breath I took. The air hung thick with an otherworldly chill, wrapping me in a blanket of dread. As I blinked repeatedly, trying to shake off the last vestiges of the darkness, those silhouettes approached. Their eyes gleamed with an unsettling light, hollow and devoid of warmth, yet filled with hunger. I stumbled backward, the residual feeling of the child's grip lingering on my wrist like a ghostly imprint. Who were these figures that dared invade this sacred realm of torment? The grotesque grins that stretched across their faces gave me no comfort. Moving cautiously, I sought refuge amongst the crumbling relics, desperate to hide from the gnarled shadows that whispered conspiratorial secrets behind me. But the basement felt Olivia's sentient labyrinth twisting into malevolence. Each step I took echoed hauntingly in the air, rebounding back like an ominous warning to stay still. "Leave her be," I shouted, though trembling doubt laced my words. The echoes of my own voice returned, teasing me with fragments of my fading courage. The shadows almost seemed to snicker, weaving through the remnants of the past as they encircled me. Suddenly, one of the figures lunged forward, reaching out with elongated fingers, their skin pallid and slick, as if they had been freshly pulled from the depths of the abyss. I recoiled, the cold aura emanating from them prickling against my skin like thousands of icy pinpricks. "Find her," a gravelly voice hissed, resonating from deep within the collective of spectral forms. "She must not be alone." In a flurry of movement, the figures dispersed, leaving behind a swirling trail of stagnant air filled with an acrid scent too familiar, one that sent my stomach churning in recognition. These were not just shadows. They were remnants of those who had come before, cursed souls tethered to this wretched span of time. Wrought with despair, I tried to make sense of the chaos surging around me. "Who are you?" I demanded, pushing through the veil of fear that threatened to shatter my resolve. "What do you want?" The figures froze, their hollow eyes converging on me, and then, as if compelled by an unseen force, they bent down as one, their heads tilted like puppets on a string. "We want what you have taken," they chorused, their voices a haunting melody blending into an air thick with despair. I swallowed hard. Could they mean the child? "I didn't take anyone," I pleaded, my voice cracking with urgency. "I'm trying to help her." But my words fell like stones into the void, echoing into an unforgiving silence. In that moment, a shift in the atmosphere thrummed beneath my feet. The ground quaked again, but not violently, rather, a pulsating heartbeat that resonated with a mounting tension. "Insomniac," the voice called out again, the companion shadows quaking with anticipation. "Your heart tethers you to this place." Panic clawed at my throat. I felt my heart racing, the melody of the nameless song echoing in my ears, the very lullaby that had haunted my dreams in childhood. "Please," I implored, backing away from the encroaching figures, desperate to find an escape. But behind me, the door that had once stood as my salvation slammed shut, barricading my exit. The vibration it sent through the walls swelled into a thunderous roar, reverberating off the very bones of the basement. Those figures twisted into sharper forms, pooling together, their laughter now a cacophony of joyful malice. The temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath fogging the air, a wispy silhouette of despair. My eyes searched desperately for any hint of light, for the refuge that could deliver me from this growing nightmare. I could feel the pull of the darkness, creeping tendrils slithering toward me, promising both solace and imprisonment. Suddenly, a dark shadow coalesced in the corner, more substantial and menacing than the entities surrounding me. It stretched closer, its features sharpening into an unmistakable Visahaya child, youthful in appearance but with eyes filled with ancient sorrow, eyes that held the weight of the lost. "Help me," she whispered, a chilling echo of the girl I thought had vanished. But this one bore a sinister resolve. "You must let go." At in that moment, the darkness within the basement surged, a tidal wave racing toward my heart, pushing me to surrender to the shadows entwined with my fears. The air thickened with the promise of despair, a seductive whisper wrapping around my mind like a soft noose as her hand reached out, offering a choice none should have to face. My breath caught. Would I succumb to their luring melody, drenching my spirit in dread, or fight against the phantoms of my haunted past? One breath was all it took to sever the strand of hope, and as that chilling hand grasped mine, the basement walls trembled once more, reverberating with an eldritch power. An ancient curse reawakened, and I realized, just a heartbeat away from surrender, I had become part of the darkness. I jolted awake, my gaze locked on the swirling shadows. But as I stood there, the shadows began to reshape into the forms of the lost children, each one reaching out towards me in a silent plea. "Join us," they whispered in unison, and as terror clutched my chest, a single, terrifying thought coursed through me. What if the true horror was not the shadows, but my growing acceptance of them? The moment felt suspended in time, the cries for help a haunting echo that reverberated in my mind with a chilling familiarity. I stood paralyzed in the heart of the basement, engulfed by the shadows that flitted around like specters caught in a wicked dance. The ghostly figures that had once been mere whispers seemed to coalesce into something more tangibly, a collective of anguish gripping at the very fabric of my soul. "Join us," they chanted endlessly, their flat, hollow voices resonating like a devilish lullaby that clawed at my sanity. As I stood teetering at the precipice of despair, my breath quickened, a panicked rhythm pulsing through the air around me. I watched in horror as the darkness around me swirled faster, threatening to swallow me whole. In that moment, I understood the truth that I had fought against all along. Every life lost within these cursed walls, every child taken was entwined in a web spun by a fate far beyond my comprehension. The shadows had not simply sought to ensnare me, they sought to reclaim their own. They were hungry for remembrance, for acknowledgement, for release from the torment of their eternal night. But amidst the terror, a flicker of determination surged within me. If I could awaken these souls to their past, perhaps I could free them, perhaps I could break the cycle. I trembled at the thought, knowing this path could lead to either salvation or damnation. Come back, I breathed, trying to force the words through the barrier of dread locking my throat. You don't have to be lost. The air responded with a palpable tension, the room vibrating under the weight of my plea, drawing their attention momentarily as their spectral gazes turned toward me. It wasn't just sorrow I saw reflected in their eyes. There was a longing, fervent desire for freedom that resonated within me. But then, in the blink of an eye, their expressions twisted, and the shadows around me began to writhe violently, blurring the line between help and horror. No, you lie. You are one of them. Shrieks erupted from the masses, their voices merging into a whirlwind of accusations that chilled me to my core. I took a step back, feeling the presence of the unseen child pulsating beside Meth, one who had beckoned, who had called for my aid. They lie, she cried, her sweet voice sharpening into a desperate plea. You must remember who you are. We need you. In an instant, the shadows fractured, coiling tighter around me, threatening to swallow me as I gasped for breath. But amidst that chaos, something deep within ignited. An ember of defiance that rippled through my gut. I had not come here to be consumed, I had come to fight. I remember, I shouted, my voice raw with the power of belief as I felt the familiar warmth of recollections surge forth. Memories long since buried, faces of smiles once shared, and joy irreparably lost. I remember who I am, and I am not afraid of you. The line between the living and the lost began to blur as reflection met truth. As I projected my will into the room, the shadows wavered and thinned, unraveling like the petals of a dying flower. I had awakened the history woven within these very walls. I could feel it pulse around me, vibrating in recognition of my courage. The child looked at me, her eyes brimming with hope and dread intertwined. You must stand firm. You hold the key, she shouted, gripping my arm tightly as shadows clawed at her. Then came a rush of freezing air, swirling violently, feeding like a tempest as the laughter morphed into furious wailing all around. The lost souls thrashing in their torment, that I could feel it intensifying the barrier between our worlds weakening. The darkness writhed as memories conjoined, swirling into a vortex, forming faces that cried out for peace. Each specter reached out toward the light, drawn to the very glimmer of hope I had conjured. But in all that chaos, I glimpsed something terrifying take shape. Not just the innocent souls trying to break free, but a greater malevolent force, a curse rooted deep within the walls, a thing that fed off despair, coalesced into a shape I could almost recognize, a figure with a smile twisted by betrayal, a remnant of the very darkness that consumed lives to keep its grip upon this realm. Foolish child, it hissed, a voice that reverberated through the darkness, boiling with rage and mockery. You think you can save them? You think you can escape? And then I felt Ida whisper in the edges of my mind, seeping through the cracks of reality, promising release, a way to erase my own pain forever. Callous tendrils of darkness curled around my thoughts, wrapping tighter, merging with my will. Oh, you will not take me, I screamed, fighting against the tide pulling me into those familiar shadows, the same ones that had whispered promises of escapism, of numbness. If I surrendered, I would become a part of that darkness, the lost, the forgotten, the hunted. My resolve steadied, blazing fiercely as I pushed against the darkness with everything I had. I will not yield. I choose to remember. I choose to live. With that declaration, a bright light surged forth, dispelling the blackness around me as I could feel the child's presence at my side, guiding me. Together, she urged, tension melding between us as the swirling cries of the damned surged louder, desperate to silence our defiance. All at once, the energies clashed. The darkness screamed in fury as my will ignited a brilliant flare, shattering its hold on the spectral children, setting them free one by Oni cascade of shimmering apparitions bursting through the veil. Their joy erupted in an unearthly choir, reverberating through the walls as they transcended, no longer bound by the shadows that kept them hidden. But in that single deafening moment, with the echoes of liberation coursing through the room, I felt a chilling realization grip my heart. Not all would escape. The curse that lurked within, rooted deep beneath my feet, remained tethered to me, a festering darkness that yearned to reclaim its own. Suddenly, An icy wind swept through the room as reality twisted again, the light dwindling faster than I could draw breath. I could still hear their cries, begging for sanctuary even as I spun around to face the lurking shadows. Me grip on the truth, now the only thing keeping me from joining them. And just as the final wail echoed in the wind, everything began to collapse. The hollow laugh of the cloaked figure mocking me as hope flickered dimmer, an intuitive truth crawling from the corners of my consciousness. Join us, it whispered, cool breath on my neck, wrapping around my essence. Your fate lies in the darkness. Before I could rip myself back from the verge of madness, the words echoed back, the ultimate revelation of horror. You are never truly free. The laughter died away, yet the chill remained, seeping deep into my bones as I realized the bitter truth. The darkness that had tried to claim the lost souls had now intertwined its fate with mine, mingling shadows forever, binding me to this reality. And as I braced for the darkness to swallow me whole, a final, agonizing question echoed within. If I was meant to stay, who would be left to remember? In that moment, surrounded by shadows, their laughter echoed one last haunting promise. The walls would always hold a piece of me, even as I now became just another fragment of their collective despair, trapped in a cycle of eternal remembrance. And above it all, the last line of reason whispered as the abyss opened to receive me. The darkness has found a home in your heart.